and to the others who are joining via Zoom, to this joint HRI-NCCR Collaborative Health Seminar on November 20th, 2024. My name is Anurag Singh. I'm grateful to live and thrive on the ancestral traditional territory of Jaquelyne, where I have the privilege to work as a nephrologist, a kidney doctor, a clinical researcher, assistant professor with the Division of Medical Sciences at UNBC and the Northern Medical Program, a teacher, and serve as the inaugural director for Northern Center for Clinical Research. Today, on behalf of you all, I have the honor of welcoming Dr. Jaquelyne Hughes, a nephrologist colleague and highly accomplished researcher who has traveled to Prince George from Darwin, Australia this morning. Welcome, Jackie. So a proud Goimugal Ipika, which is short for, woman from Wagadagam community on Mabuag Island in the Torres Strait. Professor Hughes practices at the Royal Darwin Hospital in Northern Territory of Australia and holds the inaugural position as the clinical research professor in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health advancement at Flinders University. With over 2 decades of experience, she combines clinical expertise with Indigenous knowledge, addressing the stark inequities in kidney health, where First Nations Australians are at significantly higher risk of kidney disease and related mortality. Professor Hughes's innovative mixed methods research transects quantitative and qualitative approaches and longitudinal studies, such as NHMRC-funded EGFR3 study, aimed at understanding kidney health trajectories. Her work actively involves patient experts, community leaders, clinical collaborators to inform policy and practice, notably through her leadership roles, including as co-chair of the National Indigenous Kidney Transplantation Task Force of Australia. Recently awarded the 2023 Lowita Institute Cranalana Award for Ethical Research Leadership, Professor Hughes exemplifies an approach to medicine that deeply integrates cultural responsibility with research and health improvements for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Today, Dr. Hughes will share her learnings and research outcomes of longitudinal kidney studies and programs that focus on access to timely dialysis and kidney transplantation for adult Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of Australia. But before we start, I request Elder Darlene McIntosh to start us with an opening prayer. Elder Darlene needs no introduction. She's an elder and ambassador with Jaquelyne First Nation and also serves as the Chancellor of the University of Northern BC. Elder Darlene. Thank you.
Howdy. That's way too quiet. You guys should be used to this by now. Let's try this again. Howdy. Howdy. Better. So for Dr. Hughes, I said hello, and they responded with a hello back to me in the Decal Carrier language. So we have to teach them protocol and how to address people. So what a simpler, best way to do it than just to say hello, Hadi. So it really is an honor that we bring Dr. Hughes to the university to collaborate with the university and to be a kidney specialist. And so we're so honored to have you here, Dr. Hughes. It's an honor. And so, of course, we are on the traditional territories of the Jaquelyne Nation. And if I can get you all to stand, please. So the first thing I want you to do is take a nice deep cleansing breath throughout your whole body. Nice deep cleansing breath. And when you breathe into your body, connect yourself to a deeper level. To be present here and now and not in yesterday and not into tomorrow. And we talk about self-care. And I guess that's what we'll be talking about with kidney research and and anything that applies to it, which means that we have to be in the mindset of individual self-care. And how many of us think about self-care? We don't think about it. So we need to really, in this day and age with everything so upside down and chaotic, we need to be present and grounded to what we come into, to understand with clarity and understand with wisdom that's being shared with you. And it's so important. So you go back to your classes and you may teach them, or you may have friends that are in the situation that need attendance with kidney function. So it's so nice to be present. At the university here, we've been involved in research to do with land health and healing. And how important is that? We think, well, how does land help us to heal? But it does, because if we're grounded into our environment and we listen to our environment, that helps us, gives us all the energy we need, number one. And it has a deeper understanding, land, health, and healing, how important that is. So, over 9,000 years, as proven by lithic evidence, the Claytley people lived with an ancient belief. We, the people of the mighty Fraser and the Chaco rivers, believed it was our innate responsibility was to protect the waters. For the salmon who gave up their life to their spawning grounds, giving their lives for the birthing of the new. The salmon also provided food for the people, food for the wildlife. The salmon also provided food for the forest. Chunto Wadajat, the only inland rainforest in the world which is under our protection, also provides lithic evidence of the salmon's DNA in the great cedars. Can you imagine that? The DNA of the salmon in the great cedars of our forests. So that's where that health thing comes in, right? The connection with the land. Over 9,000 years of memories of the Claytley people who have lived in harmony with Mother Earth, we now invite our guests who have come to our unceded ancestral territories to honor our people. A remembrance of our gift to you. Let us together live in harmony, work with respect for each other, and play as we come together on our beautiful lands. Our ancestors have always welcomed people to our territories. On behalf of Claytley-Tenese elders, our youth, community members, and Chief and Council, it is absolutely our honor to welcome each and every one of you to our traditional territories. All my relations, Masi, thank you. Please be seated.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Elder Darlene. So I will now hand over the floor to Professor Hughes, and over to you. Muting and okay. Can we check the microphone?
Hadi. Saungapa. Saungapa. We have welcomed one another. I would like to make a response, Elder Darlene. This is Kalalagalia language of my father, and this is an acknowledgement of your country and your people. Ngaya pasin, ina baharazaka maluka, mabaigal muniu malugal. Ngaya pasin, mariu danaka, muniu ngoi palami. We humbly come before you to this land and sea and all the people in it. We are humble coming before you in respect, knowing the eyes of the spirit of this place. I'm going to bring something of myself from my culture, and it is important that I acknowledge culture has always been here, and I come to share, to learn, and in a good spirit. For that, thank you for welcoming me here today. It's great to be here. My name's Jackie Hughes and I'm a kidney specialist in Australia. I'm the first kidney specialist who was an Aboriginal or a Torres Strait Islander person. This is extraordinary in the history of 60 years of nephrology, and there are very few First Nation people of Australia who are physicians. This is the Royal Australasian College of Physicians book. Picked it up this year. They've got a very nice style cover on the front. I brought this with me to take my notes on my journey. And it's an absolute privilege to be a leader of medicine in our country, and privilege comes with huge responsibility, because as a field leader, a first of field, we ask many questions which unsettles the status quo, because the business of medicine was not created for the survival of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, so we're living within a legacy system which we're trying to catch up on deficit. So we talk about that in terms of equity. My people talk that in terms of sovereignty. We do not have treaty in our country, so sovereignty is a challenging term and a challenging stance. But we are warrior people and we have the right to protect our land and our country. So I'll just explain a couple of things on this table. And I really brought these things as a comfort to myself, to situate myself in my people and my work as I come to share with you. At the front here, and I wonder if we'll pick it up. Do you know what that is? We call that dari. Dari is a headdress. It's worn by men, by warriors. It's beautiful. You should look up Torres Strait Islanders on the internet. Worn like this, big ceremony, objects to defend your land and your country and your women and your children. So we are fierce warriors. We have story and ceremony that talks to that. And the Torres Strait, my family's land, Mobiag Island, is pretty much the topmost point of the Great Dividing Range, which starts all the way in the bottom of Australia on the eastern seaboard and crosses through to Papua New Guinea. So these are arbitrary colonial borders of Australia, because the Torres Strait does not belong to, we belong to our people and our community and our lines. So anyway, brought that with me here because my work is in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health, and that's a natural place for me to be in, being a Torres Strait Islander woman, but also living on Larrakia country in the Northern Territory. Larrakia are the traditional owners and custodians of country there, and we have a hub and spoke model of care in the Northern Territory where business is done from Darwin, but you can be 2,500 kilometres away and have business done from Darwin. So, Anuraj and I were talking in the car, not everyone's language group or decision making is done from Darwin, but yet our clinical decision making is done from Darwin, and that creates tensions, inequities, it leaves people behind, and there is much work to do, bring people along with health. These are the colours of the Aboriginal flag, the people, the earth and the sun, and we've had the Torres Strait Islander people were recognised as Indigenous peoples by the United Nations from only as recently as 1993, so definitely within my lifetime. And the green of the flag represents the two major land masses on either side of our water, so Papua New Guinea to the north and to the Australian mainland. Black representing the people, they're just two fine black lines. The blue of our water, so we are an archipelago of major island groups, and we're in 5 regions. And in the middle of our flag is the dari, this headdress, with a 5-pointed star, meaning the unity of 5 regions coming together as a sovereign nationhood. And so we've got international recognition as First Nations people, much later than Aboriginal people did, but nonetheless that's the case. So our flag is, really quite young, and we are tremendously proud. So when I say it like that, our community should not be threatened by us. This is our attribute of our culture. Of course we are here to survive our people. And of course I am here as a servant of my family to survive my people too. And thank you to everyone who set this up for me today. I really appreciate this. Okay, so culture practiced in medicine of Zenad. Zenad is the Torres Strait. It's a language name of the Torres Strait. This is not taught in medical schools because I knew it and no one else knew it. So people learn and see from me, but hopefully we can have it more done. And really it's not that my culture is practiced, it's me as a clinician gives my patients the capacity to live within their culture, and that my prescription of medicine does not infringe their ability to live in a good way that they want to according to their culture. We'll see if you can find that thread through the talk. And stories of survival, I am a clinical researcher because I need data to tell stories to assist me to remain, useful to the medical community in the service of the patients that I care for. This is Dr. Richard Fijo, or we call him Uncle Richard Fijo. He's an elder on campus at Flinders University. He's a Larrakia man. He was born with a short arm like that, so he's had, 50 years worth of experience of a limitation in that physical function, but it doesn't really limit him in other different ways. So I acknowledge Larrakia people and place because that's where I work and that's important to do so. And I want to acknowledge other First Nation people here, and I know that there is another ceremony or event happening somewhere else in the campus, so I pass on my respects to that. You've been to Australia? I've talked about a lot of places, but you just make assumptions. So up there at the top is Darwin, and my grandparents, my mum's parents, they're cattlemen, and my grandma was a doctor. So I learnt medicine from my grandma, about how this medicine business works of biomedicine and health systems. I learnt culture medicine from my father's family. And that was really important to learn it from my grandma because when she was training in medicine, women had to stop work when they got married. You didn't get superannuation, There was, continual male hierarchies of, there's women's work and there's other people's work. So she taught me a lot actually about how to survive in the system and what was real and what was expected. So I honour my grandma, and so that's why we live in the Northern Territory, because that's where my mum's parents live. But the Torres Strait is up there, right up the top at that other blue sky, at the other blue star, and you can see that's the archipelago in between Papua New Guinea and Cape York there, and hopefully you've understood the flag since I explained it with the ribbons. I'm a nephrologist, and being first of my field and having very few other physician leaders like myself, I am called on to do other business. So I had the opportunity to move to Flinders University in the last few years, and I asked them to recognise my leadership with a professorship, which was terrific. This is the first of our people in our country. There are very few clinician researchers, through physicians training who are Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. And I negotiated to have a program of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health advancement because that's what I do in nephrology, but there is a need to have this to be transferable across other work. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that rolls out in the next few years about communities wanting to accelerate that work. And I've been working with Martha for 2 years, and we've been on an NHMRC panel a couple of years ago, and then recently we met up. And I couldn't get to American Society of Nephrology meeting this year, so I sent Shahid and Kelly along. And so they've got posters there. Kelly's got a poster there about the National Indigenous Kidney Transplantation Task Force. She's the community peer lead. She's got a lived experience of transplantation herself and kidney disease in her family, and she's based in Adelaide. Adelaide is my transplant referral centre. Adelaide is all the way down the bottom, directly straight down from Darwin, other side of the country. And Shahid is a biostatistician. He's a really terrific fellow. I've been working with him for a number of years, and most recently we've been trying to work out what's the business of Torres Strait Islander kidney disease. Because Torres Strait Islander people are 3% of 4% of Australians. So we are the minority within First Nations people in Australia. So, and when I tell you we need a voice, we need to know our data so that we can actually ask for the things and to recommend the things and to champion the things that we want to. So we will shortly be presenting that paper on how much end-stage kidney disease is counted in that clinical quality registry, and so that the community will have that data to inform their actions. I'm going to use a word called kikiriu dalwame a bit later. That means our health. No, it's not health. We don't have a word for health in our language. Our life is resurrected through overcoming sickness. So the spirit business, very important how we relate to each other, really deep in. People don't want me as a clinical nephrologist. They want me as a whole person doctor. You've got to listen to what your patients want. Okay, so thank you very much to Elder Darlene for helping to situate me on where I am and this land and this country. And hopefully I've been able to tell you a little bit about me, and you won't know everything about me and I won't know everything about you, but we could have a dialogue and get to know each other a bit more comfortably. So my belonging space is in my professional work in Darwin in the Northern Territory. My other belonging space is national because I've got national business to do for the country, but I have a very important belonging space and responsibility to the Torres Strait. And you could choose to think that that's too much tension, or you can just ride the wave, choose to have some flexibility and see where opportunities take you that open up for other people. So it's really important that I work with other people because you can get more stuff done working together and learning not to hold things too tightly because they can, you can bottleneck and constrict things. And we've got too much health gains to achieve to have single champions. No one likes a single champion. Health is for everyone, which means everyone has an opportunity to be part of that lifting work. So then I've already introduced you to my positioning. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have a characteristic of survival. We have the continuity of our cultures for 65,000 years. We exercise that survival through sovereignty, which means we have the right to be self-determined and to require others to support us in our self-determination. And for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, we exist everywhere, including as health service mob and industry leaders, and I'm just one of many examples. And my kidney business, do you guys remember, maybe to my nephrology friends, so this is a blood test tube that we use in Australia for an EUC, electrolytes, urea and creatinine. And I came into clinical nephrology work when I just fellowed as a nephrologist to do my PhD, and we were validating the accuracy of EGFR for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people because the Americans said they wanted to make a change and they were making the change. And this had this ripple across the world. What does that mean for our people? No one was doing the validation work for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people given that we have so much kidney disease. So I was able to join a new research collaboration called the EGFR study as a PhD student, and we validated that test. And that's really important because then we have truth in our medicine when we tell people what a result means in terms of how it informs clinical practice, urgency, maintenance, prevention, well-being, and the implications for family members who live with kidney disease. So over that amount of time from being a PhD student in 2007, I'm now leading the third wave of that study. We got funding just before COVID, so we've had challenges with COVID for that work. And the really valuable thing from COVID was communities asserting the rights for Indigenous data sovereignty and governance and the right to make meaning out of the data. Whereas, when the EGFR study started, it was about discovery. Full stop, paper, close a drawer. Someone else will do and that is not what Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people want. So as a research lead, you've got to be open to that responsibility of not closing doors for people. And so because there's this higher burden of chronic kidney disease, that's why we're responsible to what the data means when we have a progression of kidney disease. Okay. I did this slide to other people to a conference that I was recently, and stories is actually a substitute word for research because I'm a clinical research professor. Recently in Australia, there's been this great movement within the National Health and Medical Research Council to have Indigenous criteria for excellence in research, but also there's been recent publications of quality appraisal tools. And have you guys heard of the Consider statement or Create? Well, I'll put a link up that and maybe share that for Anuraj to share. But really senior clinicians recognising the challenges of doing high quality research that makes a difference is whose quality are we referring this work to? Biomedicine has limited quality impact to First Nations people. You have to have the quality go back to the people. So the structuring of research is really important in terms of what's the value to people, who's involved with it, who have you negotiated with, is it authorised work, how are you reporting it in respectful and sovereign ways, and where is the data held? You know, have you got a contract for your work? Where is the data being repatriated to? And so this is actually bringing in sovereignty into, you know, real world, you know, real applications of our, you know, of our business. And so that's really important then, because it helps us to feed back into the research system of who's being prioritised for funding and why are we prioritising work for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that's not led by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, that has no responsibility back to community, that's not going to do any action work around it. And, you know, and that then gives us a really good framework of, well, we need to fund, you know, working with community more. So NHMRC took out research grants from 3 years to 5 years to account for that pipeline. I got a 5-year grant, which I've been able to extend out to 6.5 because I had a COVID slowdown. So, you know, we need these practical things in order to make research valuable and valid, because we should be able to extend knowledge to benefit our people, and we need to have structures to do that. Is chronic kidney disease really common here? Does someone want to tell us about that?
1 in 10, you say.
1 in 10 with what?
Chronic kidney disease.
By what indicator?
GFR. Over a lifetime. Higher risk and higher risk populations like we serve in the north.
Yeah, that's kind of the answer for Australia too. So thank you for saying that. So chronic kidney disease can have no symptoms until you haven't got very much kidney reserve left. And then you get accelerating symptom burden. People feel really sick. And so there's this big lead-in time, potentially, if we do, you know, screening to find out when kidney disease happens. And therefore there should be a lead-in time of being able to intervene and prevent kidney disease onset, but also kidney disease progression. It's really important for families that I work with that they tell me about all the other family members that have different stages of kidney disease, or they've tried a transplant, or they've had peritoneal dialysis or things like that. So these exposures around the common causes of kidney failure in Australia for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are hypertension and diabetes, much, much more than other Australians. So when someone starts kidney failure treatment with me, they've got whole body severe vascular disease, you know, from end-stage diabetes. And that's a health justice issue, because end-stage diabetes is the absence of environmental policy, of health promotion, of primary health care to allow someone to have that much of extensive end organ damage at a very young age. So our clinical quality registry called ANZ data records, and this is that infographic on the left there, we developed that through the Catching Some Air study that I led when I was at Menzies. That's actually putting words to the really dense text that happens in our annual report, annual chapter, you know, around people, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And more Indigenous women than men start dialysis, but we don't have good data before then to tell us why that is, why there's that gender differential. We don't know if it's because men die of advanced cardiovascular disease that happens with chronic kidney disease, or if women are survivors, or if women just have this really strong phenotype to progress. That's not known. We don't know that. We're hoping to find that out with the EGFR by following people up for 15 years. And, you know, as I was explaining to you, our country is very important to us, and yet many places in Australia, because we're such a vast country, is built on hub and spoke model. So people can't be on their country from their place of belonging, from their place of wellness, unless you come from where that major metropolitan hospital is. And so I suggest it's really quite unethical to provide a medical treatment that actually causes people wellness harms, because it doesn't help people. But that could be quite simplistic, because patients also then form communities in new places where they are. But nonetheless, when I look after people when they first come to my clinic, after they first start dialysis, they're extraordinarily distressed. This is a travelling toolkit that I take with me for the EGFR3 study, the longitudinal following up over 15 years. And some of it I brought from here today that I could get through customs and immigration. And up the top there, Anna Holwell's a general physician leader at the Alice Springs Hospital. That's right in the centre of Australia. In the centre of Australia at Alice Springs, they've got the highest rates of chronic kidney disease. But they don't have a level 1 hospital. They don't have a cardiac cath lab. They've got to send their people to Adelaide. So they don't have the equity in diagnostic services or treatment services, given that they have this really high burden of very young people. These things aren't too far away from genocide, structural genocide. If we know that, because the data tells us that, we must have this justice response to help people. So she had access to, we would call that weak data. She just did a manual count in a paper record back at the time when she was doing that work in 2015 to look at people with the end point of starting dialysis and then just trying to track down how many blood tests or how many urine tests for albuminuria and low creatinine that she'd found. And, they're very quite steep slopes, aren't they? Harmonising that spaghetti plot with that dark line. An annual decline in the 5 years before starting dialysis for Alice Springs patients at around 2015, 14 mils per minute per year. Massive. When normal kidney function is 90. You're supposed to gasp at that. It's extraordinary. But that's biased sample, because she's only counting the people that have started treatment. It doesn't count the people that haven't started treatment. It hasn't counted the people that have done well, and that was just the nature of the data that she had available to her as an advanced trainee project. And then the one that's cited there, Louise Maple-Brown, C. Jason 2016, that was our landmark paper out of the EGFR study, which was a baseline and then a follow-up within 3 years showing that there was an average of 3 to 5 mils per minute annual loss in kidney function in people who are well at their first screening. They weren't sick, didn't have any acute illness. And within 3 years, at any level of any level of kidney function, if you had macroalbuminuria with an ACR as low as 30, powerful predictor of loss of kidney function. That was really important because prior to the EGFR study, albuminuria wasn't counted as within the measurement of kidney disease. It was just a blood test only. And so this gave real importance and meaning to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that even such a low level of ACR that it caused kidney disease change. It promotes policy change. It promotes clinician. What can a clinician do? Jeepers, we can do stuff within our clinical practice if clinicians know about it. It's a lot more work to change national policy. But that was really important data to confirm to clinicians that this is a really urgent condition of young families. And if you're not familiar with the heat map, at any red, very, very high risk for kidney failure, but high risk for cardiovascular disease and death. And so that's why screening is important, because kidney disease is asymptomatic for a long time and we want to prevent people from dying from heart disease. And, they want us to prevent them from getting kidney failure because kidney failure treatment's really hard to have anyway, but hard to have if you've got to live far away. So we did a big patient workshop called the Indigenous Patients' Voices Symposium Report. And some of the patients there were saying it was not their desire not to want to live. They were rejecting the model of care that was available to them. It's important to ask questions so you can refine the, jeepers. keep people alive and give them care that they want. It's pretty important. So then from Anna Holwell's paper, because that was Alice Spring's data, what are we actually doing to people in supporting them in that justice response to care for them after they've been confirmed that they needed to start dialysis because they've got a high uremic burden, they're well enough to start dialysis because some people aren't well enough to have that intensive treatment, and then we want them to survive because they want to survive. So we know that acute kidney injury, so that's a rapid change in kidney function. If that happens on chronic kidney disease, whether it's known or unknown, that's a risk factor for losing kidney function that might never recover. And so that it just puts you at a higher risk, every year. Lots of people in the Northern Territory start dialysis after an AKI without knowing the extent of their chronic kidney disease because albuminuria is so very, very common and it's asymptomatic. So you only know it's there if it's detectable. The patient experience of that when you have an unplanned dialysis start, which means you're surviving now from a treatment that someone else has to give you in a health system that's very hostile to your being there because they don't provision accommodation, housing, family support. You're in another person's country, it's a different language. The system of hospital medicine is very different to what people recognise from community medicine. So it's a very distressing environment. So I've got to explain to people how they can get home because that's what they want. Yes, I want to live, but give me a treatment that allows me to live well, and that includes connecting me back with my home. And it was really great for Elder Darlene to give us that centering, standing up, focusing here, taking a breath in. Very active de-stressing of Indigenous methodologies. You felt your body relax. You're being present for this. You could park other business somewhere else. I very much do that for my patients. They are so stressed, they don't need to see me stressed, even if the system stresses me. And that's what I teach my colleagues in my New Start dialysis transition program. We must de-stress it so that the patient can feel like they're being supported through some really challenging decisions that they're making. So I have a 0.2 clinical job where I run the New Start dialysis transition program at Royal Darwin Hospital, and my other job is clinical research, finding evidence about what we can do to improve people. So I look after people. Someone's already done a consent with them to start dialysis, unless they come from the community where I support. They'll come into me, they're at the Red, and I tell people what I'm there for. Because patients, I think, can often think that a doctor's a waste of time. What value was there in the consult? I've come all this way. Am I only seeing you? Could I just not see other people as well? Could I do this on, linked up with other appointments so I'm not having to come back every single day on a tired and off day from dialysis? So I tell people how I work so they know that they can judge whether it's meaningful to come to me and that they know what to expect about standard care, but also good care. So people can get home in the Northern Territory if you've got a transplant, but you've got to be fit for that, medically fit, and we've got to have good logistics for it. And so there's lots of reasons to be active on the list and then deactivated for acute illness. So you've got to have lots of clinical systems to support and manage that. And there's a huge amount of optimisation to get you to be waitlisted. So if you've started with a severe sepsis or you've started with an acute heart attack, those are two important reasons why you shouldn't be listed until they're optimised. And if you can't survive a general anaesthetic of 4 hours in the middle of the night, we're not going to give you a transplant until we can see that that's optimised. Many people have rheumatic heart disease, so we need to fix their heart up. So they'll go and get their valve fixed or something beforehand. Lots of people have infections in the Northern Territory. It sort of comes along with having chronic diabetes, really reduces your immune function. There's lots of environmental germs. I'll show you a picture about some extensive tinea. So there's lots of optimisation to do. And I present it in such a way as be optimised because you're well. Everyone should have a really good heart test at the start. It's your choice to be, progress for transplantation waitlisting, but it demystifies the process because no one wants mystery in their medicine, and it gives people the opportunity to say, I want that and I want that now, or I don't want that right now, I'll have that a bit later. And then I am not the rate limiting person of systemised bias or racism in medicine, which is what Australia has been called about lack of access to transplantation. And Anuraj and I were talking this morning, for families that come with end-stage diabetes, very few family members might be eligible or fit enough to be a family donor, even though that would be really great because you know the time and the day and the hour and the plan for it. Our transplantation waiting list for a deceased donor takes 3 years. In other hospitals in Australia, they have a KPI of being waitlisted for transplantation within 6 months. I think that that's really easy to do with single organ kidney disease. It's really much more of a challenge for people that have vascular disease all over their body to be waitlisted within 6 months. But, you know, it's important to have targets. And so I say to patients, let's get you waitlisted within 6 months. And if we get most of the way there, that's great. If it takes 12 months, that's fantastic. But I don't want to leave it up for patients to decide in 3 years' time because they'll have advanced morbidity in the meantime and they will exclude themselves from being fit from it. So patients need someone like me. And you need to know your system so you can advocate for how patients can get best value out of it, and they need to know what they're expecting. And they'll see me first because I see them first after starting dialysis, which means my other colleagues know how I've prepared them, and it really makes much better value for my other colleagues. They've told me this as well. So our patients often don't know what the standard of care is unless we tell them. So we should tell them the standard of care. And we should also have data to prove that we're actually trying to meet standard. Hermeneutics, is that what we were talking? Hermeneutics, all right. I'm going to tell a different story now, and we'll see if you can find some hermeneutics in it. Okay, so this lady here is an author of this is her journey, and she's an author of this paper because she wanted to have her name known. Her name is Mrs. Luter, and Payal Naidu was an advanced trainee with me at the time, and this formed part of her advanced trainee projects when we supervise trainees in medicine. This lady was remarkable. In 2017, I had just started a clinic at her community. I got assigned to it. Before that, people from that very remote island community had to fly into the Royal Darwin Hospital to have a half an hour consult with whichever registrar or consultant was on at the day. There wasn't continuity of care in that. And we sort of moved to doing outreach. So I got allocated that community for the very first time that they had a nephrologist. They didn't have a nephrologist serving that community before. And I'd negotiated with that community to do 3 telehealths and 1 annual visit. And they told me when to come, which is don't come ceremony season. So I fly in the small plane in the wet season where it's bumpy, and that's convenient for everyone that I do that. Wet season is thunder, lightning, got to take a plane home at 3, turbulence. But you can't do it in ceremony season because all the funerals and all the important things happen during the dry season, which is in the middle of the year. She had a hypertensive urgency, some visual disturbances, and had a collapse in her remote community, and she was diagnosed for the first time with advanced kidney failure. I'd just been assigned, I was doing the New Start dialysis clinic for about 2 years by that stage, and when I knew who she was and she was going to be in my community, I expected her to start with me within 2 months. But then she didn't for 5.5 years. And that's a really important story for other people to know about, because she's not that story of rapid progression, start dialysis, have a sad life. And often those stories are told in the activism space. It's like, no, there are lots of beautiful stories of people having really good outcomes of care, achieving really good milestones in their care. And, you know, she continued with what she wanted to do. I want to live at home, I want to stay employed, I want to live for my grandchildren. She was starting her grandchildren, then she's got many, many now. And really the business about her doing so well with a GFR of under 15 for all that amount of time was really great primary health care, a really great GP who was out there once a week. They have fly-in, fly-out GPs there. And he was happy to work with me in the way that I was happy to work with, and she got great care out of it. And that's a really important story to tell, because it means that there's methods of keeping people well that we should be looking to fund more and support more and grow workforce in. So it's really important. It's like, well, what's that story, and how do we How do we know what we did that assisted in that process? So this was our reflection of what we knew our service did for that community. So there's care attributes and achieved health outcomes, and she also put her lens to that as well. So involved in care, she maintained her independence, her employment, being a member of that community, and she maintained that she was respected as a Torres Strait Islander woman. Her outcomes were that she wanted to be there for her family to live. Not many people live after starting dialysis. You really are at the risk of dying. It's magic what nephrologists can kind of achieve sometimes, you know. But the treatment is hard. It's hard for people to live with. She was given the opportunities to integrate her Indigenous health practices with the other medicine that we were providing and supporting her with. She had to receive information in the way that she needed to. And many times she explained things, no, I don't want to do that. It's like, okay, that's good. What do we do now if that's not what you want to do? And so that's not someone being difficult or not participating in care. She just asked for flexibility and to negotiate. And that's an amazing outcome. Do you use words like withdraw from care or did not attend? Yeah.
Compliance.
Yeah, they're terrible words. Adherence to what? You know? Because that sets up this hierarchy. And I'm a servant of her outcome. It is my job to provide the assistance of medicine and medicine knowledge so that she benefits. She's not an inconvenience to me because I'm assigned to that region and I'm responsible for the outcomes. And these are her outcomes and that's what she wanted. And, you know, this got reported in the Medical Journal of Australia this year. The MJA have taken on their responsibility for editorial practices. Whose data is it? Whose stories are told? Why is that story important? What's the Indigenous wisdom in it and the responsibility and the data sovereignty? And so this was a case report because we wanted to describe her case because it's remarkable to have that outcome because their story is not often told, but families need to know it. And so we used storying methodology. She said, you show me what it is and I'll tell you what it meant to me along the way. And so these are now questions that we were able probably to reproduce this and ask other patients. You know, what did it mean for you to not have to start dialysis that first year in 2017? And she was able to, we didn't, you know, what's your Indigenous medicine prescription here? No, I asked her at the end of it, how did you incorporate your Indigenous wisdom? And her answers are in that paper. And I didn't ask her the answers because I was her primary care nephrologist. I had my health practitioner ask her just to allow her to be able to tell whatever story she wanted. Like, you know, she's allowed to tell her story, whether it's something that she's allowed to tell her story, that's just a full stop. And she said that her Indigenous knowledges was she used an endemic fruit of the tropics, which is found through Southeast Asia and through the Torres Strait. We know what people use. It's called the noni fruit. It tastes like blue cheese. It's very high in antioxidants. So she used to use that and she drank it. But she only started preparing that once she knew she had advanced sickness. And she counted that as part of something that was really important to her. So she had a treatment. She prepared herself. She took it every day. Her family were part of that. And she also used other stories from family to help her with it. She was not the first of her family to have kidney failure. She was a dialysis PD carer for her father, who had her same condition, hypertensive nephropathy, and for her brother. She started to do PD and she got this leak from her abdomen into her chest. So she's suffocating over a Christmas one year with this fluid. We're starting to train her up into her chest, and so she required a coronary care admission and she needed to have the fluid drained out, and then we were hopeful that it would heal, close up itself. So we re-challenged her and it filled up again, and so she couldn't do PD. And one of her answers in the question was, that is, what did it mean to you? Was, she said, because her only experience was PD with her brother and her father, and you know they died on that modality, she said that she just assumed that was about 2020, so we kept her dialysis free for 3 years. She said that that's my life finished now, because that's all she knew. And then she just said something really nice about me. It's like, but then you showed me something else, and so we just did home hemo, because she had a fistula ready to go. But then she didn't need to do home hemo for another 2 years. So, our body is remarkable, it has a capacity for wellness, if we just give it some relief and some support. And these are the really important stories about First Nations people. We have this capacity for wellness within ourselves from our family support, from our own wisdom, and the capacity to receive knowledge from others, as long as it's the right knowledge and the right sort of care and supported in that. Okay, you know that there's a whole new generation of medicines that are cardiometabolic protective for diabetes, cardiovascular disease and renal disease. We also know that there's this difference or this challenge in getting that medicine knowledge out to primary prescribers. So Dr. Mark Thomas, who's a really fantastic nephrologist from Western Australia, he gave this great talk to my community governance group for the longitudinal kidney study. And they said, that's so important, we need our other family to know about that. So we had the opportunity to publish it in Kidney Medicine, and so it's open access, and we published it for World Kidney Day. But you see there, it's so easy because that's what we do, we prescribe medicine, we prescribe tablets. But that's not everything. Really, we need to count the important outcome that if someone's surviving, they're exiting that clinical appointment with you alive, with an alive status, and that they have wellness in it. And I put there de-stress the situation, because the capacity to increase cortisol chronically accelerates, cardiovascular disease, diabetes and inflammation. So it's good medicine to de-stress your clinic and your clinical approach. And talk to people, touch them, speak to them in their first language. Do test them. Know what to test for and how to test for it. Teach, and working in trust. Yeah. As part of that responsibility that Mark Thomas took to the huge gap in life expectancy for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people with kidney disease, we wrote this paper for everyone, for primary health care physicians, but we also emphasised the first principles of the best care for improving the health of people living with chronic kidney disease is to provide culturally responsible delivery of kidney care. So that's really come under national priorities in closing their gap, and so our clinicians need to be making that, being attentive to that as well. And so then, if all of the GPs know how to do this and all of our patients know to expect it, we should be able to create some really good teamwork for action in creating more kidney health instead of more accelerated kidney diseases. And then I think because we've got to finish, because I talk too much, I'll just finish. But there are other stories out there in terms of... So I went to Darwin because my grandma was old and I just fellowed as a nephrologist. Instead of doing an Eastern Seaboard Sydney PhD, which I was going to do, I was just open to the opportunity of being useful and meaningful in the Northern Territory, which was that EGFR study. And being present with people, with clinicians who've got challenges, they've got questions, with patients who've got challenges, who want questions, who expect something. That's really just characterised my career so far. And I'm taking it a next step further with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander advancement in health, not just limited to renal disease, because kidney disease comes from many origins: political determinants, social determinants, overt racism and covert racism, education, access to employment. All of those things I address as a nephrologist, so I can hopefully assist other people in the work that they want to do around Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health advancement, to do some more structurally important work. And we know in the Northern Territory that our work in the Northern Territory changes the policy across the country. So hoping while I'm here just to talk further with you about opportunities for rural and remote health value for communities in Australia, and if that resonates with Anuraj and others for here locally, then I'll be speaking further about that with you.
Thank you, that's wonderful. I just need to make sure that the microphone is switched on. There are many viewers right now listening on Zoom. Thank you so much for the talk. Just we have a few minutes for the questions. I can't see the chat box, so if anybody who has questions, or Bree can. Okay. Any questions on Zoom, Bree? Okay. So anybody on Zoom who'd like to ask a question, they can unmute and ask. Or in the room, I can see Paul.
It's Paul here. I guess just a comment rather than the question, and just to say that I really love the blending of Indigenous health and traditional practices with modern healthcare. And in fact, I've just been in a rural health meeting all morning, and that theme comes up over and over and over again, that the Indigenous people of BC want more of that. So kudos to you for doing that. It's fantastic. And I really enjoyed your talk. Thank you so much, Jackie. And I'm sorry I wasn't there in person.
Well, thank you, Paul.
Paul, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, okay. Well, I can do, yes. So Jackie, I have a couple of titles, but I'm basically the head of the Division of Medical Sciences at UNBC and the regional dean for UBC for all their programs. So yeah, I'll be meeting you later on for dinner and looking forward to it.
Terrific, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Any questions from the room? Okay, Martha and then Pedro. Martha, please switch on the microphone so that they can hear you. So press the microphone button in front of you. Okay, there we go.
Right.
So that they can hear. Yeah.
I'm Martha McLeod, Professor Emerita from Nursing. I've got a question from one of your early slides where you had dignified response. Could you talk about more of what it means to have a dignified response or to hear in a dignified way?
You'll have to tell me which slide that is. One of those ones? Yeah. What is a dignified response to story?
It's what is a dignified response to story and whose dignity is served in the response?
Yeah.
I like to understand more about that.
Yeah. So since we did the EGFR study at baseline in 2007 and we published it in 2011, right at the time when Australia was bringing in the CKD epi. They changed from MDRD, which they brought in 2005, and they changed to CKD epi in 2011. So they were improving the measurement reporting. And so the dignity in response to the data at that time was we had already confirmed for the work that we were doing that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people had accuracy and precision in that measurement, and it didn't need to have an African American equation factor applied because that was the question. What is the nature of this African American equation factor that was being applied in America, but which Australia was taking on board? That's a dignified response to the data. And we got that in the Northern Territory straight away. It was accepted by our Territory Pathology Service to co-report that. And so it went in all of the pathology messaging every time you got a serum creatinine order done. Mm-hmm. And leading from the Northern Territory, we did that with the rest of Australia. And so that's what we did with that, that baseline cohort study. The follow-up study, though, when we have this outstanding progression with people who are well of asymptomatic progression of kidney disease, 3 to 5 mils per minute, the dignified response was to go and tell people, but we didn't. We didn't, because the research methodology only required us to report on it, but not to tell people. And so the dignified response in data comes through some of those other practices like the National Health and Medical Research Council to ask questions of what's your research translation plan? Who are your stakeholders to champion it? What are you going to do about it? And really the EGFR3 study is a dignity response to data, because sitting on this data as junior people of that research program, over 20 years, Australia has had doubling in diabetes diagnosis and doubling in dialysis starts for all Australians. But we know within that, the story of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people from what family tell us and what I see in my practice is it's still high. We haven't made a difference in that. So we wanted to tell people what happened with that rate of progression that was asymptomatic so that they would know what's happened, which is why we were intentional about Mark Thomas's paper. Find out about what the standard of care is so that you can request and to confirm, am I receiving that? Now we've got those new generation medicines as part of that as well, so it should give some more support to that. But we don't have a dignified response to data to actually confirm what happens to kidney function changes over time. So the EGFR3 study will be a taste nationally of, or actually half of Australia, what's happened to people's journeys over time so that we can work out the magnitude of wellness or the magnitude of change in kidney disease so that communities can authorise what to do next. You know, and clinicians have been so very fearful of an endpoint that stresses them, patients die. But Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people live with life, death and life stories. It is part of our culture that people come and they live and they pass and we honour them. So we can't take our sensitivities as medicine people, you know, trained in biomedicine, and say that's a challenging story to tell community when it's their data. So this is Indigenous people within the research paradigm enacting our responsibilities for sovereignty. It is not for me to withhold that story. If that's what we agreed that we would do truth in data reporting so that there can be truth in response and action. And clinicians, very often when we're funded by our governments, they'll want us to limit what we can say. So how do we get around that? You know, the authority of the community reference groups and the community leadership groups say, no, you give me that data and we will make our way to make that action. And they will invite us to come along and be supportive as the technical experts. Long answer to your short question.
Thank you. Okay, last question, Peter.
Thank you for your presentation, Dr. Hughes. I was just wondering if you could share any experience you have working with the folks you see if they have any issues related to musculoskeletal problems, is particularly folks that are going home to do the dialysis there. How can you make sure that they're ready to go? And if there's any educational resources you use there specifically tailored or more, if I can say, culturally sensitive, appropriate for the patients you see?
Yeah, so in my New Start dialysis transition program, so recognise that patients want value for time. They want a comprehensive approach. They want good, fast outcomes. So I want people to be ready to go home in 3 months. I'm going to take them from a beginner knower to a full knower. They can make decision-making on what they're doing. Physical frailty is a really important impediment to people living further away from, intensive treatment spaces like hospitals. So we now have 3.9 FTE physiotherapy for renal, only for renal at our hospital. And that was work that we did out of a pilot study within my New Start program. And we did it through COVID.
Wow.
We took that opportunity of COVID. We always needed a physio, but we took the opportunity of COVID saying, if we bring people in and we don't have a way of returning them, but they're going to come into the major centre of COVID treatment, which means that they're most vulnerable being immune suppressed. They're really weak because of uremia, from end-stage diabetes and sarcopenia and inflammatory syndromes. So, we just did a pilot study on it. I've got a paper, I can share that with you. And the physio turned it into 3.9 physio business case within 2 years. And that's been running for 2 years now. And they just got a Chief Minister's Award for it, which is great. But the other thing we did about that was our work was just noted by the National Review of Disability Impairment Tables. And so our evidence from our work got included into the improvements in that federal funding for disability support pension. And that's really important because you can't afford to live and you've got a disability that means you can't work. That pension is so important. So we've got absolute criteria there, which really helps to support clinicians for patients who have end-stage diabetes, sarcopenia and immobility and chronic and persisting endurance. But what we've actually done is renal physiotherapy, which is restorative care accessible to patients at their outpatient dialysis service and which also follows them through acute so that they can restore function before they go. That's what we've done. But really what we need to do is just prevent diabetes so they don't have peripheral neuropathy, that they don't have proximal weakness, and they don't put themselves at risk of other diabetes-related conditions, which accelerates physical function loss.
Thank you. At that, we will end the session. We're a little bit over time, so thank you, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Hughes. We'll talk and collaborate more, for sure. Okay, let's see if I can sign off.
Thank you for your questions.
Okay.